Patrick.
Thank you, Phil. I think too, when you look at this paper, this handout here, it's got the two sheets on it with the staple in it. Maybe the short-term goals here are the long-term, and the long-term are the short-term in regards to the outline. And so, if everyone wants to look at this front page, I think we see this category of permission. Last month in the Treaty Council meeting, we voted on the name of the Treaty Council moving forward, and we voted in consensus that it would be the Oceti, Sakowin, and Traditional Treaty Council. And the next question that comes with that is, who is part of that Traditional Treaty Council? And so what I'm seeing here is we actually have all the representatives here from the 68, but not necessarily all from the 51. And it might be easier to start with the 68, get all of the infrastructure established in our narrative for the 68, and then reach out to the Dakotas and Nokotas and the other parties of the 51 treaty, and then show them what we've done within the 68, and just use that as a model to collectively express our narrative of our independent and free existence prior to colonization, collectively with the other tribes as well. And that's a way to avoid the use of the word sovereignty, like we were talking about, and to try to figure out some phraseology like independent and you know, our original independence and freedom, you know, or somewhere along those lines. We've, you know, that may be, you know, something down the road, but we got to start considering the verbiage here. The colonial verbiage can discredit some of our messages and concepts we're trying to convey, but I think that's more of a refined agenda than where we're at right now. So with that being said, let's open up the floor for comments on being that we have this, you know, all representatives from the 68 treaty in here, on whether, you know, we should stay within the 68 or maybe consider developing the collective rights narrative for all parties to you know. To me, it makes more sense to focus on who's here, but let's get input from everybody. Who is party to this Traditional Treaty Council? What Oyates are represented here? Which Oyates represented? And okay.
Bidaki api, nakbeza mani we hemi. I'm from the Crow Creek tribe, which is band number 1, the Madewa Kantawa, and band number 6, the Ihanktawana. And we were brought there as, although that was Ihanktawana territory, we were brought there as prisoners of war under an executive order that Crow Creek was established. And this place here, the old ones, Ambrose McBride, he was on the Treaty Council for quite a while, and he would educate people. Wherever, any chance he had, he would get up and educate people on our treaties. And he said that our territory extended up to, in one of the treaties, our territory extended up to Camp Laframboy, and we called this what the English name for pier is, we called it Mato, and for the Chamberlain word is Makaoti, because there was a lot of sod houses there. So I tell my children, or when I talk to people, they ask me where I'm going, that's what I say, Mato or Makaoti. And I think we're under the, from the Madewa Contua, I think we're under the 1803 or 1805 treaty, and under the and the leaders there were Ironauk, Hehaka Maza, and another one, I can't remember his name, but it was also had Maza in there also. And under the Ihanktuana was Huhunapi, who I'm a descendant of. He signed one treaty and he refused to sign any more after that. He said they weren't obliging by the treaties. And his son Wanagi Ska, White Ghost, and Makabo Badu, they signed, I believe, this treaty of 1865. I'm not too well conversed about the treaties, and then I'm also confused of how many treaty councils are there. I consider myself the Oceti Shakoi, and because my ancestor Wakanto signed the 1867 Treaty of Sisituwa, even though he was Madewa Kantua and Ihanktua. So I'm not sure, but I do want to know more because we have a lack of this information, our education at our band, and so I'm trying to learn as much as I can because I want it included in our constitution also, the treaties. But I get in an argument with the council because they say, well, we're not under a treaty, we're under the executive order. So I'm taking it upon myself to learn and to to educate our children. At Stavan was Maka Bobadu had donated some land for that Stavan Immaculate Conception. And they do not allow any native cultural in there. The superintendent who's there right now, he formerly worked for the Aurora Plains Academy, where they're investigating that. And I don't know why they hired him at our school, but he really dislikes women, females. So when we go up to protect our children from misconduct, sexual misconduct, they threw me out of the school board meeting and said that my granddaughter is ruining the reputation of these teachers. So that's why I'm here, is also to learn what are we protected under for our grandchildren. And I was very colonized too. I used to think that women had no part of this, whereas it's not so. So I'm very honored to be here and to learn. And also in that one treaty, it said I interpreted as part of the health, education, and welfare of our people. So the education part, why didn't we have a part in saying what we wanted our children educated on? So that was just a question I had. And Anna Pekta.
We're part of two Oceti Sakowins, right? We have the older Oceti Sakowin, we have the Titoa Oceti Sakowin. So I think what I had in mind, what I thought was the Oceti Sakowin is everyone, LDN. And in the strategic plan, we can possibly mention all of the treaties and the executive order that's part of the Crow Creek, so that we're trying to protect everyone in the Oceti Sakowin, the Dakota and the Nakota and the Lakota. So if that's okay, we can go forward like that. So these are all, we're all Dakota originally, and we branched off into Lakota, So, you know, it only makes sense for us to don't feel alienated. You're part of us. So I think that's how we should go forward. So.
Hello. Yes, my name is Bill Means, and I represent the Sioux Nation Treaty Council, which is kind of part of the tribe, but also separate in a way to advise the tribe through the fifth member's office right now on treaty matters and on land issues. That's what was originally written into the Constitution for. And at that time, they had a treaty council along with the tribe. And so I think my role has been to try to bring the two together again, like we're talking, strategic plan. But getting back to this Oceti Sakowin, I think we got to include everybody. Reason why, because I know Elgin Badwoon and Mr. One Feather, they did a pretty complete study because Elgin presented to us one time at one of our meetings before he passed on. Now they're both passed on, so we got to rely on friends and relatives. Like Elgin, he had, I'm sure his wife's still alive, so they probably got it somewhere in their archives of the family. Maybe in a box in the basement or somewhere. Maybe in the archives of the college. But him and Gerald went and visited all the Oceti Sakowin. And they made a map all the way up into Canada, Minnesota, all the way up that way, and then back down. And then they put it on a map, and it's pretty good, real good, I should say, presentation for people to learn. And they said that all those, I think he said earlier about the chief, he said earlier about the Buffalo people. And that's what they notice of all the people. That's what they call themselves. pt1. And so these things are starting to come up again. But I think we need to start out by inviting them all because I've been to a lot of meetings. I remember over in Minnesota, they had a big meeting of the Dakota. So a bunch of Canadians came down. They said, well, we never get asked, or once in a while we get asked to come down and attend a meeting. But I noticed when we start having meetings there in Minnesota, they call it the Dakota Treaty Council. It was just a way of organizing all the tribes in that way. Minnewacan tribes, they call them. But anyway, all the people used to come at the end down to the meetings of the Dakota Treaty Council. So I think if we get familiarized with who's some of the leadership, whether we know them or not, I think they'd be interested in taking part in this. I know they would, because we didn't know them at first either, but through correspondence of people we knew, we got them to come. They're very anxious, and they attended very well all the way from Canada. And I think there's about, about 6, 7, maybe as much as 11 different separate recognized tribes of Dakota and Nakota people, all the way up to north of Edmonton. Alexis, I think, is the name of the reservation up there. I visited there. But these are places where Darrell Onefeather and Mr. Badwoon, they visited also, but they had it in the form of what do you call it when you put the computer on the wall there? Yeah, PowerPoint. I'm kind of behind on my lingo for the computers. But they had a real good, strong presentation and showed where, what was beautiful is showed where the communities were and what their name was. And so I think through the relatives we have, through other ways and computers and all that, we should be able to track those down again. And maybe we could find that presentation that Elgin showed us that time. That wasn't long ago. That was when I first came on. Him and I were appointed together. Mr. Onefeather already passed on, but he brought that to our first meeting in Martin at the college and showed it to us. I thought it was very, very good for their research to be documented like that we could use now, right now, as we're trying to reform this Oceti Sakowin. So we'll try to find that. And all of us can work on getting the various leadership names or councilmen, whoever we know up in Canada, up north, that we could invite. 'Cause I know they'll come if they knew. So that's what I want to say, to try to keep it all in one from the start instead of focusing on one.
Bill, we're going to go ahead and research those, find those emails, and then invite them at the next meeting.
Okay, my name is Reno Red Cloud. I'm out of the Red Cloud TO Spy. But my direct descendant is my dad, Reno, then my grandfather, Edgar Red Cloud, then James Red Cloud, then Jack Red Cloud, and the chief. But Oliver I know that he was with the Treaty Council. He was the chief. He's my relative, but my bloodline is through Edgar Red Cloud, but I'm still with the Red Cloud TO Spy. A lot of my issues that I deal with, like the water, they affect the treaties, they affect our people. And I represent a lot of the Oglala Sioux tribe and a lot of our efforts, but I'm here today to give my heart to this group too, because it is in my blood, and I'm here to represent my TO Spy too.
Hey, Wopilalo. One of the goals of this strategic plan is to unite all the treaty councils and hopefully one treaty council per reservation so that we can bring it all together. All of the treaty councils at Ogallala are going to have to come together.
That Thomas brings the Oglala Sioux tribe. That's the question I was going to ask, because on the Pine Ridge Reservation, I'm not sure how many different treaty councils we have, and you know, I don't know how many are represented here. Just what, one? Just one? You know, and how are you going to have a plan to like incorporate all of them, and so there's one representative from each of the seven? Because I haven't heard any type of plan or anything on how that's going to be accomplished.
We're going to get to that, but that's why we need a treaty office at Pine Ridge, or with the Ogallala, so they can work on that. However you want to do. I don't want to get in the middle of the Ogallala treaty councils, okay? I want to let them come together in unity. So, there's
Thank
just
you
one.
again. I'd like to remind you that Oceti Sakowin, who they are, Hunkpapkas, Hohoshu, Oglala, Sichagu, Sihasapa, Oceti Nupa, Naitazipa, seven campfires, Standing Rock, Eagle Butte, Pine Ridge, Rosebud, and Blackfeet, I don't know where they're at. Two Kettle and San Arcs. Back in 1965, I was a young man working at the courthouse, and my boss was Chief Judge Moses Kugu. Black Hills Treaty Council includes those people from Fort Pack, Montana, and people from Niobrara, Nebraska.
Goes all over this Ochimaka, all the way to probably Texas to the East Coast, to the woodlands, to Canada, to the Rocky Mountains, maybe even to Nevada. Our THPO identified a village in Nevada that they said was a Lakota village. So our people have been all over the place, and that's what I call our ancestral homelands. It just so happens that our grandfathers made a treaty, and it kind of secured that the Great Plains area for us. And at Rosebud, we are working with St. Francis Indian School, and we're still, in trial and error. See as you can see, what Patrick and Steve went to St. Francis Indian School, and they found out that the kids know more than we thought, and that's really power. That's the inherent right. They know who they are. The Oceti Sakowin. Even though we're Sichang, I have relatives at Standing Rock. Our history is important. Our Wotakuya Heja, now Takoni Salonkiakte. We need to know the descendants of our ancestors. I'd like to. I was happy when I found out one of my grandmas is a short woman, and I found out she's a sister to Sitting Bull. So I'm directly connected to that. And something I've been talking about is all of the old chiefs are gone, and the time has come to return to the traditional leadership. We have to select new leaders from the Tioshpai. We need new chiefs. I always say we need to let our old chiefs to let them rest in peace and start standing up to what they taught us, and to properly select new chiefs. Nacha, I come from a big Tioshpai, and most of the time they ask me to speak on their behalf. So we have Tioshpai leaders here in this room, and we have to recognize that and acknowledge them and say thank you for being here, representing your Tioshpai, because the Tioshpai moves into Oshpai and then Oyate. And you have the Tituan, Oceti Sakowin, the Tituan, and then you have the rest, the older Oceti Sakowin. So Patrick's going to kind of lead the rest of the day, but we all can pitch in. Patrick, I hope we can get some work done from here, and get some things written down, so that the next session we'll continue on. I think the Oglalas are going to feed us next time. So, won't cook that couch. So I'll hand it over to Pat, and just kind of trying to rehash or remind ourselves what we're doing. We want to focus. We want to stay focused on this document that we need to develop. And so if there's anything else, let us know. At some point, maybe Milo can say a few words too. He's got a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge and wisdom. I think he might have even been to Geneva or somewhere, Italy. Here you go, Pat.
Thank you, Phil. Today we're going to build upon this afternoon. We're going to build upon what we was doing in December when we set up the strategic planning meeting. What you have here are two documents, really. One stapled and the other is single. That's not the agenda, and those were the goals that were discussed at the last Treaty Council meeting. And the one that's stapled is really the kind of front line stuff and the big picture stuff and the strategy stuff that we're looking at as our collective treaty councils working forward together. And there's a single one here that was focused on bringing the youth into the Treaty Council community and began developing their leadership skills and giving them a voice at the table as well. And I'm happy to say that, and Phil touched upon it, that the relationships that we've established with St. Francis's Indian School Board and the University School Board at Rosebud, we've already achieved some of these vision objectives. The first vision was to educate the youth on how to articulate the goals and visions of our nation. And we've hammered them with the discovery doctrine discussion all week. We hammered them with treaty rights discussion all week. They picked it up. I've found that the less expertise you know, the easier these concepts of inherent rights are, because when we look at law, we're always focused on how we interpret it and not necessarily how the colonial oppressor's interpreting it. And so sometimes we have a misinterpretation in how we understand how the colonial oppressors actually reasoning these human rights violations and these violations of the laws of nations. So what we're lacking here is the traditional land base and creation story aspect of this vision. So maybe while we're here today, we could figure out who may be willing to come over and contract over at St. Francis Indian School and begin teaching the kids some of these things. We have access to teach the youth from kindergarten up through senior and college here and develop curriculums and so forth in regards to these agendas. Be nice to develop a little treaty council club even for the youth, and maybe what they participate in our meetings moving forward. Something along those lines was what we was discussing in the December meeting. And then we also had asked help from our students at University of South Dakota to set up a social media platform like we saw in Standing Rock, where we have a GoFundMe account associated with it, but we're able to have somebody that's very fluent in technology and social media, and the secret to really receiving funding on that platform is constant updating and engagement on it, and that's something the kids are really good at. So we've created a partnership with the students over there as well that we need to probably after this meeting begin to reach out to and help them get started. But with that being said, since we're on the youth right now in this one-page statement, is there anybody that wants to, has any questions first, maybe wants to add something to it, or has some suggestions on how to implement this further? If not, we got movement on that, so it's not like that's set and tabled. But it would be nice if we could begin to develop the spiritual and cultural teachings as well as the treaty and the discovery doctrine.
My name is Gene Tyon. I work for the Oglala Sioux Tribe Vice President's Office, and I also work with a group out of Rapid City, and I go into the school system, the middle school, and I have an intake form that I created that asks, do you have a Lakota name? Have you ever attended an Ipi or Sweat Lodge? Have you ever been aware of a ceremony? Have you ever been through a doctoring? Such questions like this it's a different kind of assessment and different kind of intake from the Euro-American. So and most of the students are not even aware of these questions, so I got to also work with a nonprofit. It's a cultural identity program that helps them just take them from there and start. We have a camp 4 times a year that helps them understand who we are.
Maybe we could develop a questionnaire in our next session where we could go to each of our schools and do a survey with all the students and kind of see where we're at.
So then after you ask those questions to them, that if they don't have a Lakota name, do you then provide them with one, or are there ceremonies that you then, that's fabulous.
Thank you. My name is Syed Haq. I'm the Director of Water Resources for Rosebud Tribe. You know, I was just wondering, the chronology that you stated today, right from the doctrine of Christian domination to, to present now, why don't we have that chronology in a written form so that we can disseminate that to our younger generation? And they can use this as a, as a talking points. Anytime, any meeting, including myself, you know what, I learned quite a bit today from your presentation. But I was wondering just, that chronology could be in the form of black and white so that we can carry, to our meetings and we can refer to that. Thank you.
Yeah, as a person who has worked in the schools with our Indian children, I think it's key, how do we present the doctrine and discovery so that it doesn't look like we're in a fight with the church over souls. And we don't want to make an eagle out of a crow, you see. So some of you may have some experience with trying to make it clear that we're teaching our history. And this is what makes it different, not to condemn the Catholics or the Episcopals, but to teach our children what is right for them, for their identity. So that's one of the things I want to bring up, because sometimes we get caught up in the policies of certain Catholic schools versus a public school. Sometimes it's easier to get work done in a public school or a Catholic school. So we got to kind of keep track of that and maybe get together on the curriculum, stuff like that, to where some of these teachers that have to implement in the classroom, check it over just so not that we have to weaken it, but that is clear.
Yes, that's currently going on at the St. Francis Indian School, and they have a treaty in history class, and the government teachers wanting to even start to add in these concepts and these historical timelines. And Lita over at St. Francis Indian School that does a treaty class, she's got an amazing timeline. You guys should check it out if you're ever over at St. Francis. Go in their class, and she's got that whole papal bull history in detail there, and it's not, I mean, it's a Catholic school. It's not condemning, anybody. It's just articulating the facts of the doctrine of Christian domination, and the kids do need to know it to better understand why we're in such a state of oppression, and that's part of the cultural identity teaching as well. So that's going on at St. Francis. How do we expand it to the other schools, right? And then how do we take it further? Because Lita's expressing, she's like, I only know so much. I'm just, whatever I can learn, I'm putting in here. But how do we, maybe there's a committee we establish on education, and that committee then is in charge of reaching out to these other Indian schools and helping develop those curriculums. I don't know, any other suggestions?
Most Indian teachers that I know, they say the greatest problem is our Indian schools are going by state curriculum. So we're limited by, hours in the day, where the teachers qualify, what qualifies someone as a language teacher. All these state standards kind of block us putting, because we all support getting into school. But the policies following state standards and accreditation standards, from Northwest or whatever, who the accreditation agency, that kind of limits our ability to make fundamental change.
Yeah, I mean, you see that debate historically in Indian country. You see some of our citizens saying, no child left behind, let's do that one, but it's really promoting this, all right, let's pit them up, let's pit our students' math scores up against these, Ivy League parents' children's who spent millions of dollars developing their math skills, right? And that's not working for us. So you're absolutely right. We do need to, but first part, we have to get consensus to bring the school system under inherent rights, and I'm seeing that happen right now over at St. Francis. And then you can't have these conflicting narratives, right? The school's chartered under the tribe. It's receiving funds from the BIE, and then it's receiving funds from South Dakota for its compliance. So because of that, we have this jurisdictional conundrum, right? Whose rules do we have to comply with? So we gotta recognize the different colonial constructs and then focus on the narrative in our own construct. But we got to get that education out there to get that consensus first, right? Because we still have those No Child Left Behind supporters out there, right? That haven't heard this history and haven't dealt with these issues of oppression in our communities, right? Or if they have, they're just completely clueless to why it's happening, right? So.
So the tribes in Washington State, there's 29 of them. They got a piece of legislation passed in the State House that every school district had to work with the tribe that was closest to them or that was their territory, and work with them to create a curriculum that taught about that tribe in the school. So that's a good model to look at. And the other thing I would suggest is perhaps having camps like used to be in the Black Hills. Was it the Rolling Thunder camp that Russell Means used to have? Was that what it was called? I don't remember. But have camps for kids, Yellow Thunder camp, and then we could do a camp here. And that there's a great resource. All of Vine Deloria's books could be bought and handed out to kids. I love Vine Deloria myself. I don't know if that's funny, but anyway, that's just a thought.
Yeah, I think that what the problem with doing the camp is the state jurisdiction would never allow it. So then what? It's been, well, come talk to these school boards with me. It is an inference, but I believe it's accurate.
Thank you. I was just going to make a couple comments on that. About 16 or, I don't know, maybe 17 years ago, I used to work in Cheyenne River. And, Ivan might remember this and anybody else from Cheyenne River, but they do have an ordinance there called Ordinance 66, which they developed their own criteria for what a language speaker is. So they said who their own language teachers are, so you didn't have, because all language teachers aren't fluent, and all fluent teachers aren't, you know what I mean? There's they developed their own set of criteria to identify the teachers on their own reservation who could teach language and culture in their schools. And what we did there I was the director of a language program, and there were several language programs there. And one set went into the schools at a preschool, you know, at a lower level, and that's where a lot of the resources were directed, because you know that children that are at a younger age grasp language at a faster rate than children that are older. And then we had, you know, students, you know, teachers and paraprofessionals that were in the schools at different levels, like the grade school level, high school level. And then we had people that were also teaching in the communities. And then what we did was we had immersion camps. And we had 4-day immersion camps, and we did have language and culture. And there was kind of a, I don't know if you would say backlash, because, you know, a lot of the language speakers were Christianized. And they fought teaching culture with language. But, you know, as we all know, culture and language are hand in hand. We can't teach one without teaching the other. And so, it was an immersion camp. It went for, you know, it was 17 years ago. You know, I don't know if there was any other immersion camps going on prior to that, but we did have immersion camps way back then. And I thought it was pretty successful. A few years we had up to 80 participants. We had children from a lot of different reservations that did show up, and some parents, and it really turned out good. You know, I had people from the community that participated, and one lady in particular, she told me, you know, during that immersion camp, we had a commitment ceremony. And that commitment ceremony, we told them that they didn't have to participate in that if they didn't want to. And during that commitment ceremony, they dedicated themselves to learning the language and participating in their culture, you know, themselves. And the whole camp took part of it. And one of the ladies told me that from that moment forward, she said she felt different. You know, that changed her life. That was like an aha moment. That's what teachers call that, when suddenly a child gets what you're trying to teach them. And she said that was her aha moment in her life, where she decided that she was going to change her life and become a speaker. And she even went to New Zealand to learn how they taught immersion in their schools. So I know that things like that are effective. You know, having that culture and that ceremony, you know, because look at our treaties. You know, how is that treaty? How is anything done in our culture? It was done with prayer first, and with our chanupa, and with that connection with Mother Earth. You know, we can't, with the Creator, we can't do anything without that. You know, it doesn't matter how many books we read, how many codes we memorize, how many cases we know about. It doesn't matter unless we have that connection and that prayer that's guiding us and pushing us, and that vision that's helping us along our way. So if we don't have that in anything that we're doing, it's not going to be effective. Anyway,
Maybe if we did form an education committee, instead of like trying to develop a curriculum for the schools, maybe the treaty council could set up the immersion camp in the summer at a sacred site and begin teaching the spiritual and traditional as part of our goals, and that they could get school credit for it, so that they would be validating the education committee's choices to run the immersion school, so forth. Yeah. Any other comments or suggestions along that? Is that, you're going to comment on this?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm Mushin Patrick Roberts, and yeah, I'm very honored to be in this circle today. You know, I come from a Roman Catholic background. I was ordained a priest in 1974. I'm also a Vietnam era veteran, and since 1984, I've really been involved in the new field of cognitive science. And what's so interesting is that your lifeways are actually resonating and integrating and correlating what we're discovering in Cartesian science in Western civilization, which is really a contradiction to what I would call the last 2,500 years of Western civilization that is built on the Greek and Roman and Christian institution, which arose in that process. And what you said is really true, is that what we're finding out in cognitive science is that our origin is really a 14 billion years of evolutionary development. And if you look in the 17th century, in archaeology, they thought that that the Earth was only 400,000 years old, and today the reality that we are facing and understanding the universe that surrounds us is really phenomenal. What I wanted to say about education is, and all the people in my network are from the outside, are all educators, and the educational system has betrayed every child in the world right now. There's nobody that is happy with learning theory, which is what Patrick is pointing to about law, that there's the theory of law and then there's the practice. And really the Oceti Sakowin here could actually bring forward for all of us throughout the world as world citizens the practice of this Wo Lakota, of this spirit sense that really goes back to our origin for all people. And if you look at the circumstances that we're in, where we're having impeachment, we're having climate change, we're having, you know, a debt-ridden global economy, there are some serious problems that we're facing. And so I'm inspired by being here, but I'm also really supportive of getting into action, because we are in an imminent crisis right now as humanity, where we are going to choose between suicide and beginning to live on Uncha Maka in adoration for this present moment and what surrounds us. We live on a beautiful planet, and it's literally going up in flames around us. So I just wanted to put in that I think that a committee for education, really bringing in the Gray Eagle Society as well as this youth society that you're talking about, that it's not just St. Francis, there's schools, there's, you know, this little girl, a 16-year-old that stepped out in front of climate change and was on the front of Time magazine. You know, she was really confronting the elders in the world, the leaders. And so I just want to say that education is a primary problem, and I think that there's a lot of gray eagles throughout the world, people with expertise in many domains that would participate in creating some new curriculum and really doing immersion with the children and getting them into a learn and earn curriculum, project management, because they don't want to go in the direction that we're going here right now. They don't want to live in a suicidal predicament. They want to actually create the uplift that we need. And we're going to need every child to get on board on that. Thanks.
Sam has a comment over here.
Mike got anything. I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Milo Yellowhair, and a little story that when I first came back to Pine Ridge, I was at the University of Nebraska and graduated, and it said, well, you got an education under the treaty, so you got to help us out. That was the bunch of old men on Pine Ridge who organized themselves according to what was mentioned earlier, the idea that Teoshpai leadership would come to fruition. But it didn't need to come to fruition because it was already in place. And they just said, okay, the treaty said it guaranteed education. It also guaranteed how to be a farmer, how to make a farmer out of a nomad, and then also gave us several things that we say that treaties have to be understood as, they told me then, as rights given. Because we had inherent rights, as was mentioned earlier. Rights given. We gave them a right to travel across our reservation, our territories, in exchange for a few things. And the word treaty is also used in the term as kind of like a pause button. And I say that because treaties, they say, well, we have to go out and treat the Indians. And this is where the word annuities come from. So they're treating us like children. Here's a piece of candy, be quiet. This type of mentality. And a lot of times when we get into discussion about education, I always reminded myself that it's one teacher for every 30 Lakota children, one building to meet that need, and all the necessary supplies to get an education for that child. But more importantly is that I'm not afraid to learn each and every day, that each and every one of us can be teachers because of our experience as a human being on this earth. And this is something that we can't shirk and give away to somebody else. Because if we hand our children over to somebody else to be educated, we are failing as parents. We are failing as grandparents. This is the issue we have to face. Because after working with the old men, Fool's Crow and Noble Red Man, called himself, translator, he said, and he was. But they translated history in a modern day concept. So how do we understand who we are as a human being on this earth? After all, whatever we are, we have to learn behavior. We learn to be Lakota. We were born into a Lakota system, so we learn to be Lakota. But we are human beings first, and we have fundamental needs as a human being. We need clean water. We need clean air. We need good food. We need to have good relationships. All of these things belong to humans. Everything else we have learned. So we can teach ourselves learning about this Mother Earth. That's why we go to sweat lodge ceremonies, because we learn about ourselves. Learn something about yourself, who you are as a human being on this earth. All of that, when we went to the United Nations back in 1977, and then formalized in 1982 under a working group called Working Group on Indigenous Populations. But that was also a learning system, because back in those days out in Moorbridge, the old men were talking about something. They said, take the United States on. We as a nation must meet with the President of the United States because they're the ones who made the agreement with us. So that was tried, and it was realized. Met with Gerald Ford in the White House. After 15 minutes of talk, they shut all the lights off, And when the lights came back on, the president was gone. So the old men said, well, we have to reload. Get us into the United Nations, they said. So that's where the first steps were taken to go into the United Nations as a member of a human population that deserves a right to be on this earth, in our realities as a human being. So we went there. We found out that they didn't have a place for us. So several years they kicked the idea around, where do we put the Indians? You know, even that, we knew that the word using Indian was already now a different mindset, or what you would call a Christendom mindset, as was mentioned here earlier. We are not Indians. So, you know, when people use this word, I always just think, well, see, that's part of the colonization process, and they're just telling us what they know. So we learned at the United Nations, or at least I did, that in order to be a nation, you have to have a population. Secondly, you got to have a language that that population speaks. Thirdly, you have to have the reason to say that we have defined borders as a group of people. And number 4, we have to have evidence of self-governance. Fifthly, which is the most important of all, is that self-governing people get into agreements with other nations, an exercise of that government with other nations and other peoples. We as Lakota people satisfy the first 4. We have defined boundaries as was enumerated here by the 1868 treaty. As also described, it says that a grandfather took his hand and circled the land of the great Sioux Nation by using water. Because we did not understand latitude, longitude in a way that the white man does, putting a square on a round world and then calling it reality. It's our fault for believing that. You know, so as we move into our living societies and where the damage has been done, every time I hear English, I always say damage has been done. Every time somebody says I go to church, I know that damage has been done. Because we don't need any of that as Lakota people. We have those things already. We pray every day in the mornings. We pray with the water to keep it pure. We cherish our relationships to each other. We don't call ourselves each other by name, but rather by relatives. These are things that are cornerstones of our society as a member of the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, however we describe ourselves. So in the last years, I've been dedicating myself, and pretty it's a lonely deal, but I know that all these 4 criteria that we meet are there, and I let our people decide with those. We have people who are defending our boundaries. We have our people who are talking about an exercise of that self-government. Will the Lakota Nation, or the Great Sioux Nation as the United States knows us, willing to enter into agreements with other nations, other peoples of the earth? Because I try to stay away from the word indigenous too now. Because by using those words, I'm just playing into their game. Because to them, life is a game. It's a scam. We say it's a type of savagery that disguised as civilization. These are the things that we have to take a hard look at. We have to do a self-examination. Learn about yourself and how far are we colonized, or how much we didn't get colonized. These are the things that we have a task in front of us as an individual within this beautiful, beautiful dream called the Great Sioux Nation. So So these are the things that when we come here, we say, if we fail to hand our children over to some institution to educate them, we are part of the problem. So we have a lot of work in front of us as a nation. Keep thinking yourselves as a nation. We are a people that belong on this earth. We belong not only to the past and the present, but also to the future. Because time is immemorial, and we are immemorial. We understand this world in a particular way. Sometimes modern society calls it quantum physics. These are the things that we have to take a hard look at. When our medicine people hit that drum and lights spark. This is energy. This is quantum energy. We understood it first, and we always prayed with it as a human being. So these are the things that we have to take a hard look at. Because this type of situation that we find ourselves in today, and all over this world that I've been to, in former times I used to travel a lot in Europe and Far East, but nowadays I spend my time in the South, Mexico, along to Chuha, all the way from Alaska, all the way to Tierra del Fuego. This beautiful mountain range that goes back and forth, north and south, the backbone of Mother Earth. And in there, I'm trying to find people who are thinking like us, as Lakota people. And I want to get into an era where we sign treaties with these peoples so that we can become and exercise our sovereignty, our way of life and who we are. We have to, because all over this place, whether you're Spanish speaking, English speaking, German speaking, or whatever language that you might think you know, it is still a colonial language. So all up and down this backbone of Mother Earth, people like us are living. They're waiting for us. They know us. They hear about us. Their spirits tell us, them, that about us. So these are the things that we have to take a hard look at when we talk about these discussions. Our grandfathers taught us a way. It's a beautiful way. It answers all of the human needs. Whether if you're lonely, about to die, or if you're born, or starting to walk. So when you say, I'm not afraid to learn, this is where it's at. We've got many beautiful people in our extent of our great Sioux nation who know these things, who read about these things, because that's where it comes. I've often said that the biggest thing that the white man has done for me is that he taught me how to read. And the more time you read, the less afraid that you are. We have met with different governments of the world, yes. Austrian government. First time a chancellor or a president of a nation met with us as a group of people that representing the great Sioux nation. How many people really know that? Not many. But we have offered that. Today, Hugo Chavez down in Venezuela has been drummed out of office and killed and murdered. Evo Morales, another one that we wanted to use because people always said that third work that you're going to do is to get us into the world court. I said, we're going to take this white man that came to our shores to the world court and let them govern it. But see, the question is always, who is the moral government? Who is the moral guardian of these people that come to our shores? Who are they? Is it the church? Who do you say, thou shalt not kill? You say that to a killer. Who do you say do not steal? You tell that to people who steal. For me, the Ten Commandments is nothing more than an indictment of that society. Because if somebody is going to come and steal from you, well, he needs to be told. But who is that moral authority over this Christendom or fiefdom or however they might describe themselves, and the language that is they had taught us? So it's this kind of things that I want to leave with you, because it's something to think about. We have to be sovereign. Now again, that word is playing into that language that this English people brought to us, or the Spanish people. But it's all this idea that somehow or another there's a God that is both benevolent and will kill you if you don't believe him. And they'll do it in his name. It's happened to us. They took our children away, turned them into warriors against us. But that's something that happens all up and down those beautiful lands called North, South, and Central Americas. But we are millions, as Floyd Westerman like to talk. And it's true. We are millions. We are millions, and it's our duty to know who they are and to get into working agreements with them. Whether if it's a treaty of cooperation in education, cultural activities, or language exchange, or whatever the case may be, or even political awareness. Today, Evo Morales is a fugitive from his own country of Bolivia. He's now living in exile in Mexico. I bring these two up mostly because when they said we need to get into the World Court, we need to have two nation sponsors to help us bring this court into the International Court of Justice in Den Haag. These are the things that seem like they knew our game plan already, that they criminalize our indigenous leadership of this world, and especially in this part of the world. They criminalize them and hunt them down like dogs and shoot them like dogs in the streets. You see, that's also our problem too. We as a great Sioux nation did not say, leave them men alone. We didn't say that. We hide behind somewhere. But these are the things that we have to look at real carefully. The language that we choose to speak and how we use it. Long time ago, in a ceremony back in the day, that old man Fool's Crow told me, he says, Takoja, yashi choni shoot you. They're going to shoot you with bad words. But, you have to live your life as a mirror. Reflect that back on them, he said. So that's what I've been doing, quietly. I've been called a lot of things. You know, one of the things that I always talked about was like what Enos Forbear once said. He said, I've been accused of everything but childbirth, he always said. Well, that's sometimes a burden that we carry on a daily basis. But I just want to say those things to all of you because I'm talking to a group of friends. Because if I'm not comfortable, I don't say anything. But today I feel, especially here, I'm glad we had this building. Thanks to the Cheyenne River people for taking care of it and maintaining it so we can sit in here and be out of the elements. Because here, when we used to come and do battle with Mr. Janklow, you had to sit outside in the car and wait it out till morning so we can have our demonstration down here at the Capitol building. Things like that. But let's say We've got a lot of resources among the Great Sioux Nation, and this is one of them. We have to make a criteria in order to us to how to best utilize a building this like this and help them maintain it. Create an everyday presence as a member of, as maybe a capital of the Great Sioux Nation. Something like that. We can use it as a university. Call it the Moccasin University. Bring it here. We volunteer our own people to teach a couple of weeks out of the year here, things like that. These are practical applications of things that we know and can utilize on a daily basis. Because like I say, time is moving on. A lot of these time that these old men and women that told us these things must be brought forward and incorporated into our daily lives. I'm just going to say that much to all of you. And please think about what you're saying and how you're saying it. You know, don't play into his game, because as I said today, it's a kind of a savagery disguised itself as civilization. Understand that, and you'll have a lot of different things that you can move forward on. All right, thank you very much.
Hashi Sam, Kunihat.
The leaders warned me about 30 seconds I have, so.
No, me. I was supposed to give me 30 seconds. I just wanted to.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, me. No.
I just have few things, not very long. I want to thank all the speakers for all the good information, good wisdom that came out. We had a treaty conference in Rapid City, and we were talking about who's going to teach our children. And there was a young group that we kind of selected and invited them into our treaty circle. Well, they've been coming to our treaty meetings, and so, and one of the other things that was mentioned at that meeting was sovereignty. We needed to come up with a name to translate sovereignty in Lakota. One of the other things was we needed Oceti Sakowin history. All tribes need to have their history. One of the speakers got up and he says, "I'm so-and-so," and they hit themselves on the chest, and they ask him, "Well, who is that?" And they don't know. They didn't know who they were, but they were sure proud to stand up and beat their chest about who they are. And we had a language conference about 2 weeks ago. I thought it was very good information that came out. We have all these qualified teachers, people with great knowledge, but we knew and we know who they are. But they're not allowed to teach because they're not certified. So who are say the state, the federal, the school systems, who are they to say that they qualify or not qualify? We as Lakota people, we know one another. And so we need to figure out how we're going to bypass that and work with the schools, the state. I think we need to make up some rules, regulations of some sort. People my age, I don't think they're going to appreciate sitting in class, relearning what they already know. And just for the sake of being recognized as a qualified teacher and to be certified. We have a lot of Lakota speakers, some Lakota speakers who are fluent. We just had a incident at home. There was a language development position open. So one of the relatives applied for it. She had like 17 years working with children, all areas. And we thought she was highly qualified. She had a bachelor's degree, and she never got selected. And the reason was they said she had to have master's degree. So my question was, so how many of those teachers that write their own curriculums have master's degrees? And so we need to somehow find a way to move away from these roadblocks and make up a good plan for the Oceti Sakowin as a whole, not individual tribes. Okay, I'm running out of air, so I better quit.
Real quick comment on the Ten Commandments, you bring up, and you see this evolution out of hunter and gatherer culture into this pagan culture that's kind of really been visualized through the Middle Eastern cultures, and that evolves into eventually into a military-industrial complex society of individualists. But it doesn't start there from hunter and gatherer. There's an evolution, and so when you look at these Ten Commandments, it's like, thou shalt not kill. It's just simple instructions from people who need instructions, right? They don't know how to live anymore. They've been indentured servants for thousands of years. A natural disaster then destroys their economy, and now they're stuck in a wilderness they've destroyed, and they need instructions. Has anybody ever seen that movie, History of the World Part 1 with Mel Brooks? Remember, he comes out, he says, the Lord Jehovah has given me these 15. He drops one of the tablets. He says, 10 commandments. So Moses is the one who is in charge of that morality, according to Mel Brooks. So where we've gotten, so we're actually getting somewhere, believe it or not, on strategy, because just keep in mind that these meetings are going to refine until we have financial resources and are off the ground. And what we're looking at right now, and we'll vote on this at the end, I'm just taking notes of everybody's comments, because everybody here has the right to comment. We're all part of the Oyate. we've decided that possibly we need to do an education committee that does a curriculum that focuses on the spiritual, traditional. We've already implemented the treaty and the discovery doctrine at St. Francis. We can build upon that to other schools. Possibly an immersion school in the summer that the Treaty Council is teaching the youth. It kind of reestablishes that youth-elder relationship. And then we had a third suggestion that maybe we go under state jurisdiction as opposed to the Oceti jurisdiction. And then we had a fourth suggestion to develop the regulatory schemes under the Oceti jurisdiction to see what the qualities of the teachers that we want teaching our students, not necessarily what the state wants. So those have been the four kind of agendas that an education committee could take over. So that's where we're at right now. We are making headway. And if there's any more comments on education, let's go ahead and get them now. And then if not, we'll move into a comment on the, we'll move into the Oceti Sakowin goals.
As far as qualifications for education or an instructor, at the visitor center where I work, we've been pushing art and food. And one of the things that has happened is a couple of our culture bearers or our artists that have been teaching, they don't have a degree, they don't have something saying that they are certified culture bearer or they're certified artists. The last that I remember, culture bearers are basically our last of our, hope and continuous of teaching and sharing the knowledge and so forth. And so what we came up with at Sitting Bull College is we're in a process right now, and we've done it with some of the fluent speakers, is doing eminent scholar, where they'll go in front of a committee and then they'll be acknowledged as traditional skills or traditional instructors or traditional artists and so forth. And so I guess that would be kind of a thing with the education committee is getting our traditional speakers, artists, teachers to fall under eminent scholar, and what does that look like, and basically that is still recognized in the education world per se. So just an idea.
And one thing I wanted to add to that, so Yvette Running Horse Colin, Oglala Sioux Tribe, is when I was doing my master's work in Alaska, they were having the same issue. And so what they did is they took the younger, they weren't language experts, and they knew it, and so but they had the degree, they had the credential, and they paired them with a master teacher, which would be a cultural bearer. Exactly. And so that's how they brought them into the classrooms, and they didn't have to deal with any of the accreditation problems, and they taught together. So just an idea.
There's a guy named Frank Adewagashik. He's Odawa, I believe. And he was working on doing some renovations, and so the county building inspector came and said, "Hey, you got a permit for that?" And he says, "Yeah, hang on right there. I'll be right back." So he went up to his computer on his letterhead. He wrote himself out a building permit, signed it, brought it down to that guy. "Oh, okay, thanks." And away he went. And he said, "That's how you exercise your right, your capacity." And so when you look at how somebody gets a degree, I don't want to use the Wizard of Oz as an example. It's a bad story, because of Frank Baum being who he was. But the Wizard of Oz told him, "Hey, what you need is a diploma." And so he gave him a diploma. How do the people get diplomas? It's because a committee of their peers says that they have the skills and the capacity to educate at a certain level. So there's nothing that prevents the Oceti Sakowin, or however you want to term it, from or any Rosebud Sioux tribe, Oglala Sioux tribe, whatever rubric you want to go under, from developing that committee, creating a very beautiful diploma, and awarding that elder, that fluent person, that diploma. Now that person is certified at the same level as that, any state master's degree or anything like that. If the community, if the nation decides that that person has that qualification. Somebody asked me at the board meeting last night at St. Francis Indian School, how do you do certain things because the state has these requirements? And I said, you do it. Just you do it. And then if they want to say something about it, then you put the domination and dehumanization context forward. And you say, you're still trying to exercise that domination and dehumanization, but we're not going to let you do that. Call them on it. And they have nothing they can say about it because they can't make that documented evidence go away. So that's just a little bit of what I want to add to the mix there.
Thank you, Steve. So in addition, then, we've also added maybe issue certificates of validation through the Education Committee. Any other comments or suggestions? Okay.
Yeah, two things. One thing I was going to come in with my nephew last night, but I was a board of director for the Lakota College, and they have offered us, you can get a college degree in Indian studies. You can get a college degree in Lakota language, and there's a master's degree. So that's for adult. We're talking about young people like that, you know, that they're talking about culture. I have one thing that I like to remind you, and that's that there's a woman prison here in Pierre. I have a relative there, so I go over there. And I talked to the warden one time, and he told me that there's 320 women inmates in there. Out of that are 30% Native American, he said. And because they're not really criminals, they're just like four offenses, DWI, or their boyfriend put something in their purse and she got caught with it, you know, like that. So they had to be there, and there's stigmatism when they get out. They can't get a job. And that, like I mentioned before, I go over there to wiping of tears. They won't let them go home if the relative died. So when I go in there and they have their Native American Day inside the prison, and this professor from the University of South Dakota Law School, he made sure that they have this sweat lodge in there. So the women have their own sweat lodge in there, they have their own pipe, and have their own tobacco. And that's one thing about that. That's the state penitentiary. That's the state building. Yet they make him smoke that pipe. And what I do is that I do the wiping of tears. You know, give him water and give them tobacco and talk to them. A lot of those, they have relatives that are passed away, but they can't come back. They have to serve the time. So, you know, those are things that start maybe somehow get them back to society, Lakota society. And that's one thing that I thought maybe something like that went out, but I used to come down there, I do it on my own, but I drove from Pine Ridge, and sometimes the interstate, it's 70 miles an hour. One time I was coming, I almost fell asleep, you know. So like that, so, you know, somebody has to do it. But to let them do it inside the state prison, smoke the pipe. And that's really something that I like that, you know. So I thought I'd tell you that one, they do respect something that's culture. the Washikus, they do that. So, you know, it's something like that. And this is something that, it's interesting. We do, our kids, Matchakojas, they can't talk like this. If you have to talk Lakota to understand your culture, pues kenia unke Lakota ageni. So, you know, that's one thing that we need to talk about too. There's some way, I just like, I'm an old man, I like to talk on and on and on, but I thought I'd tell you that much about it. Thank you for the kind attention.
Thank you very much. I think with that, we add then educate non-Indian state political entities, institutionalizing our citizens, kind of that aspect, and for the education committee as a possible role as well, if we vote on. And any more questions on education? If not, we'll break for a little 5 minutes, and then we'll get into the Oceti coin discussion of goals. Anybody else on education, youth? All right, let's break, take 5. Thank you.